Was it just a car crash? Could the most photographed woman in the world have been saved? Number 5. Princess Diana, a royal tragedy or something more? The death of Princess Diana on August 31, 1997, in the Pont de l'Alma tunnel in Paris continues to captivate public imagination and fuel conspiracy theories more than 2 decades later. What started as a high-speed escape from pursuing paparazzi ended in a tragedy that would forever alter the British monarchy and leave unanswered questions in its wake. The official investigation concluded that driver Henry Paul, who also perished in the crash, had a blood alcohol level 3 times the French legal limit and was driving at excessive speeds of around 65 mph in a 30 mph zone. Yet forensic experts still debate several aspects of the case that seem inconsistent with a straightforward drunk driving accident. One perplexing detail centers around the white Fiat Uno that reportedly made contact with Diana's Mercedes before the crash. Despite paint samples confirming an impact, the vehicle and its driver were never conclusively identified. James Andanson, a paparazzi photographer who owned a similar Fiat, was found dead in a burned-out car in 2000. His death ruled a suicide despite the peculiar detail that he suffered head wounds before the fire started. The medical response has also raised questions among trauma specialists. Diana initially survived the crash and was conscious and communicating. Why did the ambulance take over an hour to transport her to the hospital, stopping multiple times en route when the hospital was only 4 miles away? Some emergency medicine experts argue that her internal bleeding from a torn pulmonary vein might have been treatable had she reached surgical care faster. Former Metropolitan Police Commissioner Lord Stevens led Operation Paget, a thorough investigation that ultimately ruled the crash an accident. Yet his own report acknowledged that 14 critical points raised by Mohammed Al-Fayed, father of Diana's companion Dodi who also died in the crash, could not be completely disproven. Blood samples taken from driver Henry Paul have raised suspicions among forensic toxicologists. The samples reportedly contained extremely high levels of carbon monoxide, about 20.7% saturation, which should have rendered him visibly impaired with symptoms like headache, dizziness, and confusion. Yet CCTV footage from the Ritz Hotel shortly before the crash shows Paul moving normally, displaying no apparent signs of impairment. Eyewitness accounts further complicate the narrative. Several witnesses reported seeing a bright flash of light in the tunnel just before the crash, potentially consistent with disorientation tactics. Were these simply camera flashes from paparazzi or something more sinister? Diana's former butler, Paul Burrell, later revealed a note written by the princess in 1995 where she expressed fears that Prince Charles was planning an accident in my car to clear the way for marriage to Camilla Parker Bowles. The note's existence was confirmed by the official investigation, though its implications were dismissed. The Mercedes itself presented another forensic puzzle. The vehicle had been stolen months before and possibly tampered with, according to some investigators. It had reportedly been rebuilt and experienced mechanical problems shortly before the fatal night. Some automotive forensic specialists have questioned whether the car's electronic systems could have been compromised. Then there's the curious case of the missing white seat belt. Had Diana been wearing it, would she have survived? The official investigation revealed her seat belt was found in the retracted position, while the only survivor of the crash, bodyguard Trevor Rees-Jones, was the only one wearing his. As forensic science advances, so do the questions surrounding that fateful night. While official verdicts point to a tragic accident, the peculiarities of the case ensure that Diana's death remains in that gray area where forensic certainty meets the limitations of evidence, keeping the debate alive for forensic experts who continue examining this royal tragedy from every possible angle. Was it truly just a terrible accident, or will future forensic techniques finally put the lingering questions to rest? Number 4. Marilyn Monroe, Hollywood's brightest star extinguished. Did she take those pills herself? How could someone famous for being forgetful swallow so many capsules without leaving a trace? When Marilyn Monroe was found dead in her Brentwood home on August 4, 1962, the official cause was listed as probable suicide due to barbiturate overdose. Yet 6 decades later, forensic experts still debate the circumstances surrounding the death of Hollywood's most iconic blonde bombshell. The scene itself presented immediate inconsistencies. Monroe was found naked on her bed, face down, with an empty bottle of Nembutal capsules nearby. The coroner determined she had ingested a massive dose of barbiturates, enough to kill several people. But strangely, no water glass was found near the bed, raising the question, how did she swallow dozens of pills without liquid? Toxicology reports showed extreme levels of pentobarbital Nembutal and chloral hydrate in her bloodstream, yet no pill residue was found in her stomach. This peculiar finding has led some forensic toxicologists to suggest the drugs may have been administered via injection or enema rather than orally, particularly since no signs of pill capsules were found in her digestive tract during the autopsy. The timeline of discovery raises additional questions. Monroe's housekeeper Eunice Murray claimed to have noticed light under Monroe's door around midnight and called the actress's psychiatrist, Dr. Ralph Greenson, who broke into the room through a window and discovered Monroe's body. Yet police weren't notified until 4:25 a.m., a significant gap that remains unexplained. Perhaps most troubling to forensic investigators is the missing evidence. The original autopsy report and numerous photographs disappeared. Tissue samples that could have been retested with modern techniques were destroyed. Even the phone records from Monroe's house that night vanished, eliminating crucial evidence about who she may have spoken with in her final hours. Dr. Thomas Noguchi, the coroner who performed the autopsy, later expressed doubts about the suicide ruling. He noted the absence of the characteristic pill trail, residue in the esophagus and stomach, typically seen in oral overdose cases. Noguchi has stated that with modern forensic techniques, the case might have reached a different conclusion. Monroe's personal life adds layers of complexity to her death. She was romantically linked to both President John F. Kennedy and his brother Robert, relationships fraught with political danger. Her house was reportedly bugged by the FBI, and former Los Angeles County prosecutor John Miner claimed to have heard tapes of Monroe made shortly before her death that suggested she was upbeat and making future plans inconsistent with someone contemplating suicide. Forensically significant is the pronounced lividity, blood settling after death, found on Monroe's front, suggesting she had been lying face down for hours after death. Yet some witnesses claim to have seen her lying on her back when first discovered. This discrepancy in body position remains unresolved among crime scene reconstruction experts. The missing time between her estimated time of death and the notification of authorities has never been adequately explained. Some investigators believe this window provided opportunity for a thorough cleaning of the scene, removing potential evidence of others' presence. Monroe's former housekeeper later changed her story multiple times about that night, initially claiming she went to bed early, then later admitting she checked on Monroe throughout the night. Some researchers believe Murray was pressured to stick to a specific version of events. The behavior of Monroe's psychiatrist, Dr. Greenson, has also raised red flags among medical ethics experts. His decision to break a window to enter when he had a key, his presence throughout the investigation, and his influence over the narrative all suggest possible staging or manipulation of the scene. Adding to the forensic puzzle, Monroe's phone records indicated she made several calls in her final hours, including potentially to Peter Lawford, a Kennedy family connection. If she was heavily sedated as the timeline suggests, how was she coherent enough to make these calls? Several forensic pathologists have noted that the extreme levels of barbiturates in her system would have incapacitated her quickly, making it nearly impossible for her to have hidden or discarded evidence of how she took the drugs. The absence of pills in her stomach and the missing water glass create a scenario difficult to reconcile with suicide. Former Los Angeles Police Chief Darrell Gates later admitted that we knew from the beginning that she had been murdered, but political pressure prevented a proper investigation. While this statement remains controversial, it highlights the unusual handling of the case by authorities. Monroe biographer Donald Spoto theorized that her death may have been an accidental overdose, possibly administered as an enema by her housekeeper under Dr. Greenson's direction, an unorthodox treatment method that went horribly wrong, followed by a cover-up to protect the doctor's reputation. The absence of a suicide note from someone who was known to be expressive and literate adds another layer of doubt. Though Monroe had attempted suicide before, those close to her reported she was in good spirits in her final days, even making plans for the coming week. With key evidence missing and witnesses long deceased, will the truth about what really happened to Marilyn Monroe ever come to light? Number 3. JFK, the presidential assassination that shaped a nation. How could a single bullet cause 7 wounds in 2 people and emerge virtually intact? Why was the presidential limousine cleaned before investigators could examine it? The assassination of President John F. Kennedy on November 22, 1963, in Dallas, Texas stands as perhaps the most intensely scrutinized and forensically debated death in modern American history. Despite the Warren Commission's official conclusion that Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone, firing 3 shots from the 6th floor of the Texas School Book Depository, forensic experts continue to dispute crucial aspects of the case nearly 6 decades later. The controversial single bullet theory remains the centerpiece of forensic debate. According to the official narrative, one bullet, CE-399, known as the magic bullet, passed through Kennedy's neck, then struck Texas Governor John Connally's back, chest, wrist, and thigh, causing 7 separate wounds before emerging in nearly pristine condition. Ballistics experts remain divided, with some arguing that the bullet's condition is inconsistent with causing so much damage, while others contend that full metal jacket ammunition could indeed remain largely intact. The handling of Kennedy's autopsy presents another forensic nightmare. The president's body was hastily removed from Dallas against Texas law, which required a local autopsy in cases of homicide. The autopsy was instead performed at Bethesda Naval Hospital by military pathologists inexperienced in forensic pathology and gunshot wounds. Dr. Cyril Wecht, former president of the American Academy of Forensic Sciences, has repeatedly questioned the competence of this examination and the suspicious chain of custody of the body. The autopsy photographs and X-rays continue to generate controversy among imaging experts. Several medical professionals present during the autopsy have stated that the official photographs do not accurately reflect what they observed, particularly regarding the massive wound to Kennedy's head. Dr. Robert McClelland, one of the surgeons at Parkland Hospital who treated the dying president, maintained until his death in 2019 that he observed a large exit wound in the back of Kennedy's head, suggesting a shot from the front, contradicting the official narrative of shots only from behind. Acoustic evidence has further complicated the case. A dictable recording from a police motorcycle microphone was analyzed in the late 1970s by the House Select Committee on Assassinations, which concluded it captured 4 shots, not 3 as the Warren Commission claimed. While this analysis was later challenged, audio forensic specialists continue to examine the recording with increasingly sophisticated technology, yielding conflicting results about the number and timing of the shots. Eyewitness testimony presents another forensic challenge. Of 104 witnesses whose statements were analyzed, 51 believed at least one shot came from the direction of the grassy knoll in front of the motorcade, contradicting the official narrative of shots only from behind. Yet memory is notoriously unreliable, especially during traumatic events, creating a forensic conundrum when physical evidence conflicts with witness accounts. The Zapruder film, the most complete visual record of the assassination, has been subjected to endless forensic analysis. The violent backward and leftward motion of Kennedy's head after the fatal shot has been interpreted by some experts as evidence of a frontal impact, though others attribute this to a neuromuscular reaction consistent with a shot from behind. Modern digital analysis continues to reveal new details, but has not resolved the fundamental disputes. Perhaps most troubling from a forensic standpoint was the handling of crucial physical evidence. The presidential limousine, effectively a crime scene, was cleaned and partially rebuilt before investigators could thoroughly examine it. Dallas Sheriff's Deputy Seymour Weitzman initially identified the rifle found in the book depository as a 7.65 Mauser, not the 6.5 Mannlicher Carcano later identified as the murder weapon. Bullet fragments were mishandled, and chain of custody documentation was often incomplete. The question of Oswald's shooting ability remains contentious among firearms experts. Using a bolt-action rifle with a misaligned scope to hit a moving target at the distances involved would have required exceptional skill. Yet Oswald was rated only as a marksman in the Marines, the lowest qualifying rank. Shooting recreations have yielded inconsistent results, with some expert marksmen able to replicate the feat and others finding it nearly impossible within the time constraints. Neutron activation analysis, a forensic technique used to compare the chemical composition of bullet fragments, initially suggested that all recovered fragments could have come from the same ammunition source. However, more recent evaluations of this evidence using improved analytical methods have questioned these findings, suggesting the fragments may have come from multiple bullets of different composition. Photographic evidence of Oswald in the doorway of the book depository during the shooting, known as the Dorman controversy, continues to be debated. While the Warren Commission identified this individual as co-worker Billy Lovelady, facial recognition experts remain divided, with some arguing the proportions and features more closely match Oswald, which would provide him an alibi. The timeline of events following the assassination has troubled investigators. Officer J.D. Tippit was killed 45 minutes after Kennedy was shot, allegedly by Oswald. But reconstructions of Oswald's movements suggest he would have had difficulty traveling from the book depository to the location of Tippit's murder in the time available, especially since witnesses saw him at his rooming house in between. Gunshot residue tests on Oswald's cheeks and hands proved inconclusive, neither definitively proving nor disproving that he had recently fired a rifle. Modern GSR analysis might have provided clearer results, but this evidence is forever lost. Similarly, fingerprint evidence on the rifle and cartridges remains disputed among fingerprint experts, with questions about whether the partial prints truly match Oswald. The involvement of Jack Ruby, who killed Oswald on live television 2 days after Kennedy's assassination, adds another layer of forensic mystery. Ruby's movements before the shooting, his access to the police basement, and his connections to organized crime figures have led some investigators to question whether his action was truly the impulsive act of a distraught patriot, as he claimed. With each passing decade, new forensic techniques bring fresh examinations of the evidence, but also new interpretations and disagreements. Will advances in ballistic imaging, acoustic analysis, or digital enhancement finally resolve the most enduring forensic mysteries of the 20th century? Or will the assassination of JFK forever remain a case where the evidence allows for multiple, conflicting narratives? Number 2. Natalie Wood, Hollywood starlet lost at sea. How does a woman terrified of water end up drowned in the middle of the night? Can modern forensic science solve a mystery that's been floating for decades? The drowning of actress Natalie Wood near California's Catalina Island on November 29, 1981, initially ruled as an accident, has transformed into one of Hollywood's most enduring forensic mysteries. The 43-year-old star of West Side Story and Rebel Without a Cause was found floating in the Pacific Ocean while on a weekend yacht trip with her husband Robert Wagner, actor Christopher Walken, and the boat's captain, Dennis Davern. What makes Wood's death particularly perplexing to forensic experts is her well-documented fear of dark water. Friends and family consistently reported Wood was so terrified of deep water that she avoided scenes involving it and had previously expressed fears about drowning. This psychological profile makes the scenario of her voluntarily entering the ocean in darkness highly questionable to behavioral analysts. The physical evidence from Wood's body has generated ongoing forensic debate. The autopsy revealed bruises on her arms, wrists, and face, along with a significant abrasion on her left cheek. While the original medical examiner attributed these to her attempts to climb back onto the dinghy or yacht, forensic pathologists who have reviewed the case have questioned this interpretation. Dr. Michael Bodden, former New York chief medical examiner, has noted that some bruises appeared inconsistent with self-inflicted injuries while trying to climb aboard a boat. Perhaps most significant was the 2011 discovery by the Los Angeles County Coroner's Office that Wood had fresh bruises on her wrists, knees, and ankles that appeared to have occurred before she entered the water. This revelation was substantial enough that in 2012, the cause of death on Wood's certificate was changed from accidental drowning to drowning and other undetermined factors, officially reopening the case. The timeline of events that night remains disputed among the witnesses. Captain Davern later stated that Wagner and Wood had an intense argument shortly before she went missing. He described hearing loud noises from their stateroom and alleged that Wagner delayed calling the Coast Guard after realizing Wood was no longer on board. This contradicted Wagner's initial statement that he and Walken had been chatting after Wood had gone to bed, only discovering her absence when he went to the bedroom. Forensic toxicology revealed Wood's blood alcohol level was 0.14%, with traces of motion sickness medication and painkillers in her system. This combination would likely have impaired her coordination and judgment, making her late-night decision to allegedly board a dinghy alone even more puzzling to investigators. Some medical experts have questioned whether someone in her impaired state could have even untied and launched the dinghy by herself. The dinghy itself presented several forensic anomalies. When found, it was in an unusual location relative to where it would have drifted based on currents and wind patterns that night. Additionally, one oar showed evidence of being tied down while the other was loose, an arrangement that experienced boaters find peculiar. The ignition key was turned to the off position and the gear shift was in neutral, suggesting intentional operation rather than an accidental fall from the yacht into the dinghy. Wood's body was found floating face down about a mile from the yacht, wearing a down jacket, nightgown, and socks but no shoes. Forensic examinations of her clothing determined the jacket would have become waterlogged quickly, significantly hampering swimming ability. Experiments conducted with similar jackets showed they initially provide some flotation, but become deadly weights within minutes, raising questions about why someone terrified of water would enter the ocean wearing such an item. The position and condition of Wood's body raised additional forensic questions. Typically, drowning victims are found face down with arms outstretched, but witnesses reported Wood was found with her arms tucked as if hugging herself against the cold. Some forensic analysts have suggested this position is more consistent with a body that was already deceased before entering the water, though others dispute this interpretation. A crucial piece of evidence is the timeline between Wood's disappearance and the discovery of her body. Based on body temperature and the progression of rigor mortis, medical examiners estimated she had been in the water for several hours. However, the dinghy was reported missing much later than Wood herself, creating a discrepancy that has never been fully resolved. In 2018, Robert Wagner was named a person of interest by investigators, though he has never been charged with any crime related to Wood's death. Wagner's evolving account of that night has troubled investigators, initially claiming he argued with Walken, not Wood, but later acknowledging an argument with his wife. He has consistently denied any involvement in her death and refused to speak with investigators when the case was reopened. Witnesses on nearby boats reported hearing a woman crying for help around midnight, with one couple stating they heard someone calling, "Help me, someone please help me," for nearly 15 minutes. These accounts, if accurate, contradict the theory that Wood silently fell off the yacht unnoticed. The boat's captain, Dennis Davern, published a book in 2009 claiming Wagner was responsible for Wood's death following their argument. He alleged that Wagner discouraged calling for help after Wood disappeared, stating, "We don't want to do that now." Davern admitted he had lied to investigators during the initial investigation, creating questions about the reliability of both his original and revised statements. Forensic entomologists examining marine growth on the dinghy have questioned whether it was actually deployed that night as claimed. The pattern of algae and small marine organisms suggested to some experts that the dinghy might have remained attached to the yacht longer than reported. Marty Rully, who co-authored Davern's book, has claimed that rope marks were found on Wood's legs during the autopsy but not documented in the report. If true, this would introduce the possibility that Wood may have been restrained at some point, though without the original evidence, this claim remains speculative. As with many cold cases, advances in forensic science continue to offer new avenues for investigation. Modern techniques for analyzing bruising patterns, enhanced methods for testing decomposed tissues, and improved understanding of drowning pathology could potentially resolve unanswered questions if applied to preserved evidence. Nearly 4 decades after her death, the question remains: did Natalie Wood accidentally fall from her yacht as originally concluded, or does the physical evidence point to a more sinister explanation that has eluded investigators for generations? Number 1. Kurt Cobain, suicide or something darker? Can a person with 3 times the lethal dose of heroin in their blood manage to fire a shotgun? Why were crucial pieces of evidence destroyed before the case was fully resolved? The death of Nirvana frontman Kurt Cobain on April 5, 1994, officially ruled a suicide, continues to generate significant debate among forensic experts, private investigators, and devoted fans. Found in the greenhouse above his Seattle garage with a fatal shotgun wound to the head, Cobain's death came at the height of his fame and in the midst of personal struggles, creating a perfect storm of circumstances that have fueled forensic controversy for nearly 3 decades. The toxicology report from Cobain's autopsy revealed a blood heroin concentration of 1.52 milligrams per liter, 3 times the typically lethal dose even for a habitual user with high tolerance. This finding has become a central point of contention among forensic toxicologists and pathologists. Many experts question whether someone with such a massive amount of heroin in their system would retain the physical coordination necessary to manipulate a shotgun and pull the trigger. Heroin at these levels typically induces unconsciousness within seconds of injection, making the sequence of events as described in the official report physiologically questionable. The crime scene itself presented several peculiarities that have troubled forensic analysts. The shotgun, a Remington Model 1120 gauge, had no fingerprints on it, not even Cobain's. While it's possible that handling the weapon with sleeves could explain this absence, forensic specialists find it unusual that not even partial prints were recoverable. The position of the gun across Cobain's body rather than fallen aside has also raised questions among crime scene reconstruction experts about whether it could have naturally landed that way after a self-inflicted shot. Handwriting analysis of Cobain's purported suicide note remains contentious among document examiners. The note itself primarily discusses Cobain's disillusionment with his music career and appears to be saying goodbye to his fans, with only the final lines directly addressing his wife and daughter. This has led some forensic document examiners to suggest the note may have been a retirement letter that was later amended. Most notably, the handwriting in the final 4 lines appears somewhat different from the rest of the note according to some analysts, though others dispute this finding. The lack of gunpowder residue on Cobain's hands troubled initial investigators. While not definitive proof of foul play, forensic ballistics experts would typically expect to find residue on the hands of someone who fired a shotgun. The absence of this evidence has never been fully explained in official reports. Rosemary Carroll, Cobain's attorney, raised concerns about a practice note found in his wife Courtney Love's backpack that appeared to show someone practicing Cobain's handwriting. While this could have innocent explanations, forensic document examiners find such evidence potentially significant in questioned death investigations. The timeline surrounding Cobain's death contains several unexplained gaps. He had left a rehabilitation facility in Los Angeles on April 1st, but his movements over the next several days remain largely unaccounted for. Credit card records show purchases made with his card after the estimated time of death, though these could potentially have been made by someone else with access to the card. Tom Grant, a private investigator hired by Love to locate Cobain when he left rehab, has become the most prominent advocate for the theory that Cobain was murdered. Grant points to multiple forensic inconsistencies, including the toxicology findings and the positioning of the body and weapon. While his conclusions remain controversial, his documentation of the case has raised legitimate forensic questions that warrant consideration. The Seattle Police Department has faced criticism for their handling of the investigation, particularly their decision to wash the shotgun before all forensic testing was complete, and their rapid conclusion of suicide before exploring all alternative possibilities. The case was never officially treated as a homicide investigation, which some forensic specialists argue limited the thoroughness of evidence collection. El Duce-born Eldon Hoke, the frontman of the band The Mentors, claimed in a filmed interview that Love had offered him $50,000 to kill Cobain. While many dismiss this as an unreliable claim from a notorious shock rocker, his mysterious death by train impact days after the interview has fueled conspiracy theories. Forensic value of such testimony is limited, but the timing has troubled some investigators. The role of Michael DeWitt, the nanny staying at Cobain's house, remains under-examined according to some investigators. DeWitt had been the last person to see Cobain alive according to official reports, yet his detailed statements to police have never been made public, creating a significant gap in the timeline. A persistent forensic question involves the shotgun shell. Crime scene photos show the shell on Cobain's left side, despite the fact that the Remington Model 11 ejects shells to the right. This apparent inconsistency in the physical evidence has never been adequately explained by investigating authorities. The amount of blood at the scene has been described as surprisingly minimal by some forensic analysts who have reviewed the crime scene photos. While head wounds from shotgun blasts are typically catastrophic and result in significant blood spatter, the scene showed less blood than might be expected, raising questions about whether the body may have been moved after death. Rome incident. Just weeks before his death, Cobain had survived what was officially described as a suicide attempt in Rome, where he consumed approximately 50 Rohypnol pills. However, Cobain later insisted to friends this was an accidental overdose, not a suicide attempt. This prior incident forms an important part of the psychological profile that led authorities to quickly conclude suicide in Seattle. The greenhouse where Cobain died had only one entrance, and investigators noted that the door could be locked from the inside. This physical detail has been cited as supporting the suicide conclusion, though some investigators question whether someone could have locked the door from the outside using other methods. Several witnesses reported seeing Cobain after the estimated time of death, though these sightings remain unconfirmed and contradict the official timeline established by the medical examiner based on decomposition and rigor mortis. In 2014, Seattle police reviewed the case files and examined 4 previously undeveloped rolls of film from the scene. They concluded that the new evidence supported the original finding of suicide. However, they did not conduct new forensic tests on preserved physical evidence that might have resolved some of the outstanding questions. Despite multiple requests, Cobain's body has never been exhumed for further examination. Modern forensic techniques unavailable in 1994 might potentially resolve some of the persistent questions, particularly regarding the trajectory of the shotgun blast and the precise timing of heroin injection relative to death. Will we ever know with absolute certainty what happened in those final moments, or will Kurt Cobain's death remain suspended in that gray area where forensic evidence meets the limitations of investigation?